After the age of 60, metabolic, immune, and vascular functions decline significantly, making the brain particularly sensitive to inflammatory and thrombotic factors. One common kitchen habit, reheating leftover food, can unintentionally trigger serious pathological processes such as endothelial inflammation, elevated blood pressure, and ischemic stroke. Why is that? Certain nitrate-rich vegetables and protein-rich foods, when reheated, especially under uneven heat distribution, like in a microwave, can form harmful compounds, including nitrosamines, acrylamide, and lipid peroxidation byproducts. Numerous studies have shown that these substances can damage vascular endothelium, promote systemic inflammation, and increase platelet activity, thereby raising the risk of thrombus formation. In older adults, particularly those with hypertension, atrial fibrillation, or atherosclerosis, even a small blood clot circulating through the bloodstream can reach the brain and block a vessel, resulting in an ischemic stroke. This type of stroke accounts for more than 85% of all stroke cases and remains the leading cause of long-term disability in the elderly. As a clinical neurologist, I have encountered many patients who appeared otherwise healthy, eating well, not smoking, yet still suffered strokes during sleep or shortly after dinner. The cause often lies in subtle biological reactions triggered by reheating seemingly harmless foods. Today, I'll walk you through 9 popular reheated foods that could be silently harming your brain. Some of them might be in your fridge right now, so stay with me because the last one may be the most dangerous of all. Before we dive in, if you haven't subscribed yet, I recommend you hit that button and turn on the bell so you never miss another health tip made just for you. If you enjoy this video, type 1 in the comments. If not, type 0 to let me know how I can make better content for you. 1. Reheated potatoes. For adults over 60, something as simple as reheating leftover mashed potatoes from last night's dinner may seem harmless. But if not handled properly, it could quietly trigger an ischemic stroke. Potatoes are a common starchy vegetable, especially varieties like russet or Yukon Gold that are high in amylopectin. However, once cooked, if potatoes are left out at room temperature for too long or not stored correctly, below 5 degrees Celsius, or 41 degrees Fahrenheit, they can become a perfect environment for the growth of Clostridium botulinum. This is a type of bacteria that thrives without oxygen and produces botulinum toxin, one of the most dangerous neurotoxins known to science. In older adults with weakened immune systems and slower digestion, even small exposures to these harmful bacteria can have devastating effects. The toxins produced can cause nausea, vomiting, and neurological symptoms such as blurred vision, drooping eyelids, and muscle weakness. But what's even more alarming, and why I bring this to your attention today, is that these effects can go deeper, quietly damaging your vascular system, altering your blood pressure overnight, and triggering the formation of blood clots in narrowed arteries. And yes, those clots can travel straight to your brain. Mr. Samuel Wills. Tisha T is a striking example we cannot forget. An elderly man living alone. He had a routine of cooking large batches of food on weekends and reheating individual portions throughout the week. One Thursday morning, He was rushed to the hospital in a confused state, with right-sided weakness and loss of speech. The diagnosis: ischemic stroke caused by a blood clot blocking the left cerebral artery. Lab tests revealed signs of systemic inflammation, electrolyte imbalances, and the presence of bacterial toxins commonly found in improperly stored starchy foods. After a thorough history was taken, we discovered that the night before, he had eaten leftover mashed potatoes that had been sitting on the kitchen counter for more than 10 hours. This created ideal conditions for the growth of Clostridium botulinum, a bacterium that can release potent neurotoxins, especially dangerous for older adults with weakened immune defenses. Although Mr. Wills survived, the aftermath was serious impaired mobility, speech difficulties, and the loss of his ability to live independently. He once prided himself on his independence. "I thought I was saving time," he told me with tears in his eyes. "I never thought dinner could do this to me." His case highlights a reality that is often overlooked after the age of 60. The body loses much of its ability to neutralize and eliminate toxins effectively. Slower digestion, weakened immunity, and hardened arteries make older adults particularly vulnerable to even small amounts of bacterial or foodborne toxins. These substances don't just upset the digestive system, they can cause inflammation of the blood vessel lining, raise blood pressure, and trigger the formation of clots that may lead to an ischemic stroke or heart attack. So please, if you're hearing this, cooked potatoes should be refrigerated within 2 hours of cooking. When reheated, the internal temperature must reach at least 74 degrees Celsius, 165 degrees Fahrenheit. Never consume food that smells odd or has a strange texture, even if it looks normal. One moment of carelessness can result in lifelong consequences. Don't let convenience in the kitchen become the reason you lose your independence. So, what's next? If reheated potatoes can pose such a hidden risk, what about rice? Another food we all keep in our fridges and reheat without a second thought. But rice has a danger all its own. A bacteria that doesn't die in the microwave and can spike your blood pressure without you even knowing it. Let's talk about rice and why the way you reheat it might be quietly harming your brain. If you're still watching and finding these insights helpful, please comment number 1 below to let me know you're with me. Now, let's move on to point number 2. 2. Rice. Rice is a basic and familiar part of the daily meals of millions of older adults. It's easy to cook, filling, and affordable. However, what few people realize is that this seemingly harmless food can become a hidden risk factor for serious vascular events if not stored properly. After rice is cooked, if it's not cooled quickly and placed in the refrigerator within 2 hours, it can become a breeding ground for Bacillus cereus, a common spore-forming bacterium. What makes this organism especially concerning is its heat-resistant spores even after reheating, especially in a microwave. These spores can survive. Worse still, the harm doesn't come from the bacteria themselves, but from the toxins they release. For older adults, these toxins don't just cause gastrointestinal discomfort, they can increase blood vessel permeability, trigger vascular inflammation, and in individuals with existing conditions like high blood pressure or atherosclerosis, set off a systemic inflammatory response and promote clot formation. A small clot that forms after an ordinary meal could travel to the brain and cause an ischemic stroke, particularly during sleep. When blood pressure naturally fluctuates and brain perfusion is reduced. This is not just a theory. Multiple clinical reports have documented cases of vascular inflammation, blood pressure instability, and stroke in older individuals after consuming starchy foods that were left out at room temperature for too long, especially rice. I used to be skeptical until I met Mrs. Helen Alvarez, a 9-year-old retired Sunday school teacher from Wisconsin. She came to the clinic with what seemed like mild symptoms, occasional dizziness, blurry vision in the morning, and one episode where she slurred her words as if drunk, even though she hadn't touched a drop of alcohol. Her daughter, who brought her in, assumed it was just old age. But from my medical experience, I knew these were classic early signs of a neurological issue. Blood tests revealed elevated CRP and interleukin-6 levels, markers of systemic inflammation. Her blood pressure showed dramatic swings in the morning, with sudden spikes after waking up. An MRI scan confirmed small areas of transient ischemic attack, TIA, often called a mini stroke. There was no injury, no infection. So what was the cause? After ruling out common risk factors like smoking, diabetes, or atrial fibrillation, I turned my focus to her daily habits. Her daughter mentioned that she usually cooked a large pot of rice at the start of each week and reheated it for meals throughout the week. Upon further questioning, I learned the rice often set out for over 4 hours before being refrigerated. This is a critical window during which Bacillus cereus, a spore-forming bacterium, can multiply. Its spores can survive the cooking process. And more importantly, the toxin it produces is not destroyed, even by boiling or microwaving. In older adults whose immune systems are weaker, blood vessels stiffer, and inflammatory control diminished, these toxins can trigger inflammation of the vessel lining, which can promote clot formation. The result is a stroke, painless, silent, and sudden. One morning, you simply wake up and can't finish a sentence. Mrs. Alvarez is now on blood thinners and attending speech therapy. At a recent follow-up, she told me, "I thought I was saving time and money. I didn't know a single bowl of rice could take away my ability to speak." That sentence has stayed with me ever since. That is the most important message I want to share with every older adult. Food safety is brain safety. A few simple but essential habits can help lower your risk of stroke just by changing how you handle your daily meals. Only cook the amount of rice you plan to eat in one meal, especially if you live alone. If you need to store leftovers, put the rice in the refrigerator within 1 hour after cooking. Don't leave it to cool naturally on the counter. Reheat rice only once, and make sure it's steaming hot all the way through at least 165 degrees Fahrenheit, 74 degrees Celsius. If the rice smells sour, feels sticky or slimy, or has been in the fridge for more than 36 hours, throw it away. Remember, a single bowl of rice is not worth losing your ability to walk, speak, or live independently. One more serious warning. Many frozen meals that contain rice may have been thawed and refrozen during transportation. This creates a hidden danger you can't detect just by looking, unless you read labels carefully and understand how cold chains work. Now, if reheated rice, a food we all assumed was harmless, may quietly set off a stroke, what else in your fridge might be putting you at risk? You may be surprised to learn that chicken especially dark meat like thighs and wings, becomes even more dangerous when reheated because of what it does to your blood vessels and how it invites blood clots in the night. Let's talk about that next. 3. Chicken, especially dark meat. For many older adults, chicken is a top choice. It's a lean source of protein, easy to digest, and lower in cholesterol than red meat. But what most seniors don't realize is that how you handle cooked chicken afterward, especially when reheating dark meat like thighs, wings, or the underside of the breast, can quietly pose a risk to your blood vessels and brain. After cooking, dark chicken meat that's cooled down and stored in the fridge continues to break down over time. When it's reheated, especially in a microwave, which often heats unevenly, the proteins change again and produce harmful byproducts called AGEs and LOPs. These compounds are known to trigger inflammation in the body by activating cytokines. Chronic low-grade inflammation like this is a well-known risk factor for high blood pressure, atherosclerosis, and even ischemic stroke. The danger doesn't stop there. If the chicken isn't reheated to a safe internal temperature, and harmful bacteria like Salmonella or Listeria can survive. Listeria is especially dangerous. It can grow even in the fridge and survive if the cold chain is broken during freezing or transport. Also, endotoxins, toxic substances released by bacteria when reheated chicken is consumed, can impair the lining of your blood vessels. This may lead to poor blood pressure control, narrowed arteries, and increased blood clot risk, all of which raise the chance of a sudden brain blockage. You might not feel anything unusual right after eating, but in the hours or days that follow, early warning signs can appear quietly. A sudden rise in nighttime blood pressure, persist unexplained headaches, or slight trouble speaking clearly. These may be early signs of a mini stroke, a red flag that a full-blown stroke could be coming. One of my recent patients, Mr. John Redmond, 81 years old, a retired U.S. Army veteran, now living in Ohio, he came into my clinic with symptoms that immediately raised a red flag. He described waking up feeling heavy-headed, confused, and slightly weak on his right leg. His daughter thought it might be low blood sugar, but with my experience, I knew these were early neurological signs that required urgent attention. We rushed him for imaging and the scan, and just as I suspected, a small ischemic stroke had occurred due to a blockage in one of the tiny arteries on the left side of his brain. What surprised me was that John had no history of heart disease, no diabetes, and his cholesterol levels were well under control. So I had to dig deeper. After speaking at length with him and his family, the real cause slowly became clear. John had a habit of batch cooking chicken thighs every weekend and reheating individual portions during the week using a microwave, no thermometer, no internal temperature check. Just heat it up, eat, and go to bed. The night before his stroke, he ate a piece that had been sitting in the fridge for nearly 5 days. After reheating, he ate and went to sleep. Just 12 hours later, a part of his brain lost oxygen due to a small blood clot. The silent buildup of inflammation from reheated dark chicken meat, combined with mild dehydration, common in older adults, increased blood viscosity, and natural age-related stiffening of the arteries created the perfect storm for that clot to form and travel to the brain. John survived, thankfully, but he can no longer drive. His memory remains intact, but his mobility is clearly reduced. I thought I was doing the right thing. He told me, "No one ever said chicken could do this." And that is the real tragedy. So many seniors believe they're living wisely, saving money, eating protein, doing what they've always done, but they forget a 75-year-old body is not the same as a 40-year-old one. Digestion slows, blood vessels stiffen, the immune system behaves unpredictably. What once seemed harmless can now quietly become dangerous if you still choose to reheat chicken, especially dark meat. Make sure it reaches a core temperature of at least 165 degrees Fahrenheit, 74 degrees Celsius. Never reheat it more than once. Don't keep it in the fridge for more than 3 to 4 days. Use a stovetop or oven rather than a microwave, which often heats unevenly, and if it smells off, looks discolored, or feels rubbery, throw it out. No meal is worth risking your brain health. Now, if even something as familiar as chicken can quietly raise your stroke risk, what might be hidden in foods we think of as super healthy? Take leafy greens, for example, especially spinach. It's often called brain food, but when reheated, it can undergo biochemical changes that may silently raise blood pressure and stress your blood vessels. Let's talk about that next. 4. Spinach and leafy greens. If you're over 60 and trying to eat smart for your heart, brain, and bones, chances are you've made leafy greens a regular part of your diet. Spinach, kale, chard, maybe in your lunch salad, your dinner stir fry, or even your morning smoothie. These vegetables have long been praised for their benefits to heart health, joints, and brain function. But here's the truth most people don't talk about. When you reheat leafy greens, especially in the microwave or at high heat, they can quietly increase your risk of blood vessel damage and even stroke, especially in older adults. I know this sounds alarming, but this isn't meant to scare you. This is based on real clinical data and biochemistry. As a neurologist who's worked with thousands of seniors, I've seen more than a few cases where someone was eating healthy but ended up having a stroke. All because of one small detail they overlooked. Let me explain. Leafy greens like spinach and kale are naturally rich in nitrates. When eaten fresh or cooked properly, these nitrates turn into nitric oxide in your body. Nitric oxide helps relax blood vessels, improve circulation, and even boost brain function. But when these greens are cooked, then cooled, and later reheated, especially at high heat, the nitrates can change into something more dangerous, nitrosamines. These compounds have been linked to oxidative stress, blood vessel damage, and blood clots. In younger people, the liver and antioxidant systems can often handle small amounts of nitrosamines, but for older adults, these compounds can quietly trigger inflammation, destabilize plaque in the arteries, and activate clotting mechanisms in the bloodstream. The result, a higher risk of ischemic stroke. One of my patients, Judith Morrow, age 81, is the perfect example of a healthy, disciplined senior. After losing her husband, She lived alone but stayed independent, cooking her own meals and taking good care of herself. She was proud of sticking to a heart-healthy diet and truly believed in the benefits of leafy greens like spinach and kale, that foods she had heard were good for the brain and circulation. Each week, Judith would steam a big batch of organic greens, divide them into small containers, store them in the fridge, and reheat one each day. To her, it was a smart and time-saving plan. That was until one morning, her neighbor found her collapsed on the living room floor. Judith was still awake, but her face was drooping on one side. She was slurring her words, and her eyes couldn't move properly. At the hospital, the doctors confirmed it. She had suffered an ischemic stroke. A blood clot had blocked a small artery in her brain. She didn't have high cholesterol, didn't smoke, and while her blood pressure was a little high, it was still under control. Everything looked normal, but her blood tests showed something unusual: high levels of nitrooxidative stress, a sign that her cells were damaged by harmful compounds built up from breaking down nitrates. When we looked closely at her diet and daily habits, one pattern stood out. She was reheating leafy greens over and over throughout the week. And that turned out to be the key detail: vegetables high in nitrates like spinach, kale, or bok choy can turn dangerous when reheated, especially in the microwave. The nitrates in these greens can change into nitrosamines, a group of chemicals linked to blood vessel damage, chronic inflammation, and higher risk of blood clots in younger people. The liver and kidneys can usually filter out these toxins, but in older adults, the body's detox system slows down. That means these harmful compounds can build up silently over time and cause serious problems. Judith said, "From her hospital bed, I was just trying to do the right thing. No one ever told me vegetables could become harmful." That's the heartbreaking part. Many seniors may be accidentally harming their own health through habits they believe are helping. Because as the body ages, it handles food differently. What was healthy at 40 can become risky at 80, not because the food changed, but because the immune system, blood vessels, and digestion are no longer the same. So what do I recommend to my patients? Eat leafy greens fresh, or cook and eat them right away. Don't store them too long and reheat, especially not after 24 hours. Avoid using the microwave to reheat vegetables, and never reheat the same greens multiple times. This doesn't just apply to spinach, kale, chard, amaranth greens, bok choy. They all fall into this group. And for people with existing conditions like high blood pressure, diabetes, artery disease, or a history of mini strokes TIAs, it's even more important to be careful with these foods. Your brain's health depends directly on the blood that feeds it. And that blood flow can be disrupted by something as small as a reheated serving of greens. So before you press start on the microwave next time, stop and ask yourself, is this meal nourishing my brain or quietly damaging my blood vessels? And if this information has made you question how you treat vegetables, wait for the next part. We're going to talk about carrots and beets, two root vegetables that seem completely harmless, especially for seniors, but might actually take part in the same dangerous chemical chain reaction. 5. Beets and carrots. If there's one group of foods that most older adults trust completely, it's vegetables. especially sweet root vegetables like carrots and beets. For years, we've been told they are nature's medicine. Great for the heart, eyes, memory, and immune system. They're full of vitamin A, folate, fiber, and antioxidants like betalains and carotenoids. No one ever questions a plate of boiled roots. But unfortunately, that trust can sometimes be misplaced, especially when these vegetables are reheated after being cooked and left to cool. The problem isn't with your intentions, it's with chemistry. Both carrots and beets naturally contain nitrates in their original form. These compounds are beneficial. They help relax blood vessels, improve blood flow, and lower blood pressure. But once they've been cooked, stored in the fridge, and reheated, especially in a microwave or at high, uneven temperatures, those nitrates can change into nitrites, then further into nitrosamines, and nitrosamines are a real concern. They've been directly linked to inflammation in blood vessel linings, oxidative stress, and a higher risk of blood clots in the brain's tiny vessels. This isn't fear-mongering. It's a proven fact in molecular medicine and toxicology. When you regularly eat reheated vegetables like these, nitrosamines can trigger low-level but ongoing inflammation in the endothelium, the inner lining of your blood vessels. This makes your blood stickier, encourages clot formation, and increases the chance of a tiny clot forming silently. It could be the very thing that causes a stroke. One of my patients, Mrs. Dorothy Hill, a 5-year-old retired florist from Iowa, was the perfect example of someone who took care of her health. She walked every morning, stayed well hydrated, managed her blood sugar naturally, and followed a mostly plant-based diet. Her daughter gifted her a blender, and Dorothy began making her own beet carrot soup every Sunday, dividing it into glass jars to eat throughout the week. Everyone praised her for being thoughtful and eating healthy. No one imagined that this seemingly harmless soup would be the very thing that led her to a stroke. That Thursday morning, Dorothy woke up confused. She couldn't remember her phone number. Her speech was slurred, and her right hand began to go numb. Her daughter immediately called for an ambulance. At the hospital, she was diagnosed with a left-sided ischemic stroke caused by a blood clot blocking the middle cerebral artery. What puzzled the doctors was that Dorothy had none of the usual risk factors. No diabetes. Her cholesterol was under control. She didn't smoke. She wasn't on blood thinners or blood pressure medication. But blood tests revealed something unusual. Her marker of inflammation was high, and there were traces of mild nitrite toxicity. This is rare, but important. When we reviewed her eating habits, we discovered she had been reheating the same beet carrot soup for several days, and often in a microwave using glass jars with metal lids. So what happened inside her body? Both beets and carrots are high in natural nitrates, which are helpful at first. They improve circulation and lower blood pressure. But after being cooked and stored in the fridge, these nitrates can turn into nitrites. Then, when reheated at high or uneven temperatures, especially in a microwave, nitrites can further convert into nitrosamines, a harmful compounds known to inflame blood vessels, damage the endothelium, and increase the risk of blood clots. Dorothy had no idea her healthy homemade soup was slowly creating the perfect storm for a stroke. She survived, but with lasting effects. Her memory is still there, but she struggles to speak fluently and can no longer arrange flowers as she once loved to do. At her follow-up visit, she whispered, "I just wanted to eat healthy. I didn't know something I made myself could betray me." It was a slow sentence, but one full of awakening. So if you're eating cooked root vegetables, like beets and carrots, remember? Cool them quickly and refrigerate within 1 hour of cooking. Don't reheat them multiple times. Never microwave them in containers with plastic or metal lids. If it smells sour, tastes odd, or looks darker, throw it away. Best of all, eat fresh, steam, or cook and consume on the same day. What happened to Dorothy wasn't bad luck. It was a predictable biological response in an aging body. A damaged blood vessel, a clot that formed overnight, all starting from a meal that was meant to be nourishing. And if you think root vegetables are the worst of it, wait for what's next. 6. Eggs. Eggs, especially boiled and scrambled, have been a common breakfast choice for many older adults. They're packed with protein, easy to digest, convenient, and affordable for years. Eggs have been considered a healthy food, but not many people know that once eggs are cooked, cooled, and then reheated, especially in a microwave or inside plastic containers, a chemical change can happen that may harm your health. When reheated, the sulfur compounds in egg whites break down and release hydrogen sulfide gas. This is what causes the familiar rotten egg smell. But more importantly, this gas can react with the proteins in the egg, especially under high heat, to create harmful byproducts like heterocyclic amines and free radicals. These substances can cause inflammation inside your blood vessels and lead to oxidative stress for older people whose livers may not detoxify as well, whose blood vessels are stiffer, and whose circulation is slower. Eating reheated eggs, even just once a day, it can cause blood pressure to rise, make platelets stick together, and increase the risk of blood clots. These clots can travel to the brain and lead to an ischemic stroke. What's most dangerous is that this process often causes no pain or digestive upset. So many people think the food is still safe. An old egg might be harmless when you're 40, but at femukhalfjerds, it can quietly trigger a stroke while you sleep. Not because eggs are bad, but because your body has changed. One of my patients, Mr. Larry Donahue, an 81-year-old retired fire chief from Ohio, lived a disciplined and healthy life. Every morning, he woke up at 6 a.m. and made breakfast following the same routine. Every Sunday, he would boil 12 eggs, store them in the fridge, and eat 2 each day throughout the week. Sometimes, he would warm the eggs in the microwave for about 30 seconds before eating. To most people, that sounds perfectly reasonable time-saving. Nutritious, no frying, no sugar, a healthy habit. But one Wednesday morning, his wife found him collapsed in the hallway, slurring his words, with weakness in his right arm, and a confused state of mind. At the hospital, a CT scan revealed that he had suffered a left brain ischemic stroke caused by a blood clot blocking the flow of blood to the brain. He had no major medical conditions. No diabetes. No. Atrial fibrillation, and his blood pressure, while slightly elevated, was still under control. However, his blood tests showed high levels of inflammation and signs of oxidative stress, both of which can contribute to clot formation. When we reviewed his daily habits, we found several small but important details. The eggs were stored in plastic containers, reheated daily in the microwave, and had been kept for more than 3 days. These small choices created from gut lining irritation to inflammation in the veins to slowly thickening blood over time. In older adults, even a small clot can have devastating effects. Mr. Larry was lucky to survive, but he's now partially paralyzed on his right side and is relearning how to speak. During one of his therapy sessions, he slowly told me, "Doctor, I thought I was eating right. No frying, no sugar, just eggs. I had no idea they could hurt me." That sentence haunted me. He did many things right, but was missing one key piece of knowledge. Even healthy food can become dangerous if stored or reheated the wrong way, especially after age 70, when digestion, liver and kidney detox, and blood vessel function all decline. So, if you're boiling eggs for the week, store them in glass containers. Avoid microwaving them, and either eat them cold or reheat gently on the stove. Don't keep cooked eggs for more than 3 days. And if after eating you feel bloated, tired, dizzy, or foggy, don't ignore it. These may be early warning signs. Your memory, your speech, your ability to walk, they all depend on how you treat even the simplest foods. And if something as basic as an egg, a so-called superfood, can silently become a threat. And just imagine what happens when you reheat foods that were already preserved with chemicals. Let's talk about processed meats and why those leftover sausages or strips of bacon may be far more dangerous than you think. If you're still watching and finding these insights valuable, please comment number 1 below to let me know you're here. Now, let's keep going with point number 7. 7 processed meats: bacon, sausages, cold cuts, bacon, sausages. Cold cuts are familiar, convenient, and tasty foods for many older adults. With a time-saving lifestyle, many people over 60 get into the habit of buying processed meats in bulk, storing them in the fridge, and reheating them daily. It seems harmless, but from a medical perspective, especially when it comes to brain and blood vessel health, this can be a serious mistake. You may already know that processed meats are high in salt and contain many preservatives, mainly nitrates and nitrites. But what most people don't realize is this: when these meats are reheated, especially in the microwave or fried at high temperatures, those nitrates and nitrites can turn into nitrosamines. Nitrosamines are toxic compounds that damage cells, especially the delicate lining of your blood vessels. Studies have shown that nitrosamines are linked to inflammation in the blood vessels, oxidative stress, and a higher risk of blood clots. In younger people, the body's detox systems, like the liver and kidneys, are still strong, so the damage can often be controlled. But in older adults, where arteries are already stiff. Circulation is slower, and liver function has declined. Nitrosamines may not be cleared in time, leading to sudden spikes in blood pressure. Blocked arteries and stroke. Let me tell you about Mr. Howard Ramsay. He's 78 years old, a former U.S. Marine living in North Carolina. His life has always been a picture of discipline and resilience. Even in retirement, Howard kept a strict morning routine: wake up early, do a few stretches, and prepare his breakfast every morning. And he ate exactly 2 slices of turkey bacon, low fat, low sodium, reheated in the microwave. Alongside it, a cup of black coffee and a slice of toasted bread. On paper, it sounded healthy. No cigarettes, no fried eggs, no greasy food. I quit smoking 30 years ago. Doc, he once told me, I figured a bit of lean meat was harmless fun, but one Monday morning, his wife found Howard standing still in the kitchen, gripping the counter. His face drooped to one side. He couldn't speak. Cold coffee spilled across the floor. Howard was conscious, but his eyes were lost. A brain scan at the hospital showed a clot had blocked blood flow to the left side of his brain, and ischemic stroke. His basic health numbers were surprisingly normal. Slightly high blood pressure, but under control. Steady heart rhythm. No strong family history, but his blood work revealed a different story. His CRP was elevated. His blood was thicker than normal. And most importantly, traces of nitrosamines were detected. We traced every detail of his routine, and the one clear pattern was his daily habit of reheating processed meat in the microwave. It wasn't that the turkey bacon itself was bad, but processed meat stored for several days, then repeatedly reheated, especially in a microwave, can cause preservatives inside to break down into nitrosamines. These are toxic compounds known to inflame blood vessels, damage the endothelium, and increase the risk of clot formation. At Howard's age, with slower detox functions, stiffening arteries, and fragile circulation, even a small trigger can tip the balance. He survived, but now walks with a cane. He no longer speaks as he once did. Today, he communicates with a small whiteboard and marker, and during one speech therapy session, he scribbled a few shaky words to me. I thought I was living healthy. Didn't know every slice was adding a little risk. And he's not alone. Many older adults choose lean or low sodium meats as a healthier option without realizing that long storage and repeated reheating, especially in the microwave, can quietly turn a seemingly harmless breakfast into a silent stroke trigger. So, what can you do? Prioritize fresh meat and cook it on the spot and eat it the same day. If you do eat processed meats, reheat only once and avoid using the microwave. Don't store it for more than 3 days, and always use an airtight glass container. Avoid cold cuts if you're taking blood pressure medication or are dehydrated, because your blood may clot more easily in those conditions. And if, after a meal, you feel bloated, dizzy, or slightly tight in the chest, don't ignore it. That may not just be age catching up with you. It could be your circulatory system sending a quiet warning. And if you think the risks only come from salty or heavily preserved foods, I just wait for what's next. Another common favorite, creamy, comforting, found on dinner tables everywhere, might be hiding just as much danger. Let's talk about dairy and why a simple bowl of reheated mac and cheese might carry more risk than you realize. 8. Dairy-based dishes. Creamy but risky. There's something deeply comforting about soft, creamy, dairy-rich dishes. A warm bowl of macaroni and cheese on a rainy night, a spoonful of creamy seafood chowder, a slice of rich, bubbling lasagna that brings back memories of family dinners long past. For many older adults, especially those living alone, these ready-made dairy meals, just one microwave away from being served, are more than just food. They're comfortable, they're nostalgic, and sometimes they feel like someone still cares. But here's something you won't find printed on most food labels. And it's the very reason why more than a few seniors have landed in the emergency room after what seemed like an innocent meal. When dairy-based dishes are cooked, cooled, and then reheated, especially in a microwave or non-stick pan, a quiet biochemical reaction begins. The fats and proteins in dairy, stable when fresh, begin to oxidize at high temperatures. This creates harmful compounds like lipid peroxides and advanced glycation end products. The names may sound technical, but their effects are painfully real. They trigger inflammation, damage the inner lining of blood vessels, and raise the risk of clot formation. And in older bodies, where circulation is slower, blood vessels are more fragile, and detox systems are less efficient. That risk is magnified. Now imagine that clot traveling to the brain, just one dinner, your favorite comfort food, could become the spark that triggers a stroke. Let me tell you about a patient I'll never forget. Mrs. Betty Langford, 84 years old, was a quiet woman from Missouri, a retired literature teacher. She lived neatly and followed a steady routine for most of her life. But when her daughter brought her in for a checkup, something had clearly changed. She had frequent dizziness and headaches that pulsed with her heartbeat. Her daughter was even more worried. Mom's been forgetting names, missing appointments. One day, she even forgot to take her blood pressure meds. Her test results caught my attention right away. Betty's blood pressure fluctuated wildly, skyrocketing in the morning, then dropping dangerously low at night. Inflammation markers were elevated, and her carotid ultrasound showed that her arteries were narrowing and stiffening faster than expected. But what troubled me most was how sudden it all was. No new medications, no falls, no recent illnesses or trauma. So we sat down to talk, and as Betty's daughter casually described her mom's daily routine, one comment made me pause. She barely eats anything now. Just heat up a little bowl of mac and cheese every night before bed. Sound familiar? A harmless comfort food. But for older adults, tiny details, like reheated again and again, stored in plastic containers, or eaten late at night, can trigger a cascade of silent but dangerous biological effects. When cheese and dairy fats are cooked, cooled, and then reheated, especially in a microwave, they can generate oxidized compounds like lipid peroxides. They cause inflammation in the blood vessels, make the blood stickier, and increase the risk of clot formation. That's a serious threat inside the aging body. where blood vessels are fragile and detox systems slower. 1 week later, Betty called but couldn't form a sentence. When she arrived at the hospital, she was diagnosed with a minor stroke. A blood clot had blocked circulation to the left temporal lobe. It's the part of the brain that handles language and memory. Fortunately, she regained most of her speech after therapy, but her memory, it never fully came back. With tears in her eyes, her daughter told me, "I never imagined the food she loved could be hurting her brain." That's why I'm telling you this story. The aging body doesn't process food the way it did at 40 or 50. The liver is slower. The kidneys filter less efficiently. The blood vessels are more vulnerable. So what can you do? Avoid reheating dairy-heavy dishes more than once. Never use plastic or foil containers in the microwave. If you must reheat, use a ceramic or glass pot and warm gently on the stove. Choose lighter evening meals like roasted sweet potatoes, feki soup, or grain porridge. Most importantly, if a food leaves you feeling bloated, thirsty, or uneasy afterward, don't ignore it. That's your body telling you it's overwhelmed. A bowl of mac and cheese can feel comforting, but in an 80-year-old body, slower, more fragile, it might also be the spark that lights the fuse for a silent stroke. And if a seemingly innocent dish like that can pose a hidden danger, just imagine what happens when you reheat something even more sensitive, spoil-prone, and rich in reactive proteins like mushrooms. We'll talk about that next. 9. Mushrooms. For many older adults, mushrooms have earned their reputation as a superfood. They're naturally low in calories, rich in B-vitamins, antioxidants, and known for their ability to support the immune system and reduce inflammation. They're a go-to in many healthy recipes, from soups and stir-fries to hearty veggie sautés. But what most people don't realize is that under certain conditions, mushrooms can turn from helpful to harmful, especially for those over the age of 60. Unlike typical vegetables, mushrooms are part of the fungi kingdom. Their cellular makeup is unique, which means they don't respond to heat, time, or storage in the same way plant-based foods do. Once cooked and left to cool, mushrooms begin to degrade quickly if they're not refrigerated promptly and properly. And when these cooked mushrooms are reheated, particularly in a microwave, their proteins and bioactive compounds can undergo oxidation. This process can lead to the formation of toxic substances and pro-inflammatory metabolites, which aging kidneys and livers struggle to eliminate efficiently. More than just causing indigestion, these compounds may silently increase oxidative stress in the body, a biological imbalance linked to the damage of blood vessels, especially those supplying the brain, in seniors with existing health concerns like hypertension, vascular disease, or reduced organ function. This can elevate the risk of clot formation and cognitive decline over time. Let me tell you about Mrs. Eleanor Patterson, an 80-year-old retired librarian from Oregon. She was independent, mentally sharp, and loved trying new vegetarian recipes. One of her favorites was mushroom barley soup. Hearty, a flavorful, and perfect for the cooler months. She would cook a big batch on Sunday, store it in containers, and reheat it throughout the week. At first, there were no signs of trouble, but over time, Eleanor began experiencing persistent headaches, fatigue, and occasional confusion. Her daughter noticed slurred speech one morning and brought her straight to the hospital. We ran a full-stroke protocol. Imaging revealed microvascular damage in the brain, the kind caused by repeated inflammation and compromised blood flow. Her lab showed elevated oxidative markers and mild liver strain. She hadn't had a major stroke. Not yet, but she was on the edge. When we reviewed her habits, we uncovered the hidden culprit: reheated mushrooms consumed daily for nearly 3 months. The very food she believed was supporting her brain health was through improper storage and reheating, slowly placing toxic stress on her vascular system. Her body, once resilient, could no longer clear those inflammatory byproducts, and in that vulnerable state, it had begun to turn on itself. Eleanor recovered with lifestyle changes and care, but the damage to her short-term memory remained. It's strange. She told me once, "I thought mushrooms were medicine for my brain. I never imagined they were hurting it." And that is the tragedy I want to help you avoid. As we age, our margin for error narrows. What your body tolerated at 40 can become a silent danger. At 75, the enzymes that protect you weaken. The filters in your kidneys and liver slow down. The walls of your arteries become thinner, and any toxin, even a mild one, lingers longer, does more damage, and takes longer to repair. Mushrooms, when fresh and properly prepared, can still be part of a healthy diet, but they should never be reheated after sitting in the fridge for more than a day or two. If you store them, refrigerate them immediately in airtight glass containers. If they feel slimy, smell off, or have changed color, throw them away. Never microwave mushroom dishes in plastic or foam containers. And above all, do not reheat them more than once. Your brain depends on circulation, clarity, and oxygen. Don't let a small oversight in your leftovers become the trigger for a life-changing stroke. And now that we've walked through all 9 hidden risks, from innocent vegetables to cozy comfort foods, now, I'd love to hear from you. Take a moment to reflect and share one thing you've learned and plan to apply in your own life. Let's support each other on this journey toward embracing these truths. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a comment with 1. If not, feel free to comment with 0. Your feedback means a lot to us. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel for more content like this. Thank you for watching. And here's to living life on your own terms. A.